Saruman the White is the Lord of Isengard, a counselor to kings, a master of ring lore, and the chief adversary of the enemy. Great is his wisdom, yet greater still is his pride. These tales start before his fall. The treason of Isengard has not begun. Perhaps Saruman's doom is already written. Or perhaps your heroes can change the ending and save the White Wizard from corruption. Saruman's fate and that of all of Middle-earth lies in the hands of your heroes. And that is the premise of the Lord of the Rings role-playing Trials of Saruman from Free League Publishing. And I'll share my review right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I'll be sharing my review of the upcoming The Lord of the Rings role-playing Trials of Saruman from Free League Publishing. This is written by Gareth Hanrahan, and the 144-page hardcover with PDF is going to carry an MSRP of $39.99 when it lands in stores in June. Now, of course, to ensure that you receive that PDF absolutely free with the physical book, make sure that you do order from freeleaguepublishing.com. Now, the PDF should be available soon over at DriveThruRPG, and I will take a guess it'll be available for around $19.99. Having said all that, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Trials of Saruman for the Lord of the Rings role-playing. A few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Free League Publishing were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside. And then, of course, this is an adventure campaign. So if your lore master has pre-ordered this, maybe they're talking about picking this up when it hits stores, keep in mind there are spoilers ahead. I do want to warn you of that right up front. Also, if you are running the One Ring, then the exact same campaign is available as Hands of the White Wizard. So you could essentially take this review and use it for Hands of the White Wizard because the campaign is exactly the same. It's just mechanically a little bit different because that's statted for the One Ring. And of course, the conversion here is for 5e. All right, so first thing we're going to do is take a peek at the credits page. A lot of folks worked very hard to bring this to life. So let's give credit where credit is due. Trials of Saruman is a 6-part adventure campaign spanning 35 years. So this is a very epic campaign. And it does begin long before the events of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So at this point, Saruman has not been corrupted by Sauron. Sure, he's prideful, he's resentful in some ways, he's suspicious of some of his allies, but he is still firmly in the camp of dwarves, elves, and men. Now, one of the really cool aspects of this campaign is that the fall of Saruman all has to do with the actions of the player heroes throughout the upcoming adventures. I thought that was a really, really cool twist. Now, of course, before the campaign kicks off, the lore master has to decide something very, very important. is Saruman's fall set in stone? So if nothing the player heroes do can change the fact that Saruman's going to be corrupted by Sauron, then you're going to approach this a little bit differently. Now, of course, you could also have it where if the player heroes go through the various different adventures in certain ways, that Saruman probably doesn't end up being corrupted by Sauron. Really wild stuff. So, as this campaign progresses, of course, the player heroes are going to accrue shadow points, but based on their actions, so will Saruman. And then we'll actually track that as lore masters as this campaign continues along to see what changes might be taking place, not only with Saruman himself, but with Isengard. So, as an example, if Saruman hasn't been gaining many shadow points, then as the campaign progresses, when the player heroes visit Isengard, they will find that really nothing's changed. And there is preparations for war, but it only involves men. Whereas if there's a lot of shadow points, it's going to look like it would in the Two Towers, where it's orcs and the trees have all been torn down and there's a lot of industrialization going on. So I like that a ton. I got to give Garrett Hanrahan credit because, normally when we see different releases for the Lord of the Rings role playing and the One Ring, things don't tend to skew too far off of J.R. Tolkien's roadmap. Here, things could go way, way differently as far as the events of the War of the Ring. So we're going to start off with some information about Isengard and the tower and the fall of Saruman. And then we're going to begin the campaign. And the campaign is going to start off in the year 2965. You have some options here. The first three adventures can kind of be played in any order. You can start off with whatever one you would like. But from there on out, then we do kind of get into a chronological order. So the way the book is laid out, we do have our first adventure where the player heroes are sent off to Dunland because, of course, Saruman's trying to ally the Dunlanders with the other allies who are going to be fighting against the dark forces of Sauron. And there is a monster which is terrorizing the various different tribes of Northmen. So the player heroes are dispatched in order to deal with that monster. And it's kind of a troll creature. But the thing is, the main aspect of this adventure isn't necessarily fighting this troll thing. It's all the machinations going on in this tribe and how the player heroes end up embroiled in this and what they end up doing. Now, I should point out, as far as the accrual of shadow points, sometimes the most obvious action is going to gain shadow points, whereas thinking a little bit outside the box or maybe not being as cold-hearted or as cruel as the player heroes think they may need to be is going to save them from earning those shadow points and, of course, adding to the corruption of Saruman. Then we have this great ship that has been dispatched by Mordor, and it's kind of scouting the coastlines, and the player heroes are dispatched to check that out. And this is going to actually reappear later on in the campaign. This is pretty cool here because what the player heroes are actually doing is there's a sea king who has emerged who says that they're descended from the ancient kings. So that's what the player heroes are actually dispatched to investigate. And then they happen to find that this sea prince is associated with this great black ship. Pretty cool stuff going on there. We also have another mission where the player heroes are dispatched to rescue an ally, and they're going to end up having to deal with orcs. And then they find themselves on the outskirts of Moria, the mines of Moria. We have another adventure where the player heroes are dispatched to meet with Treebeard, who Saruman kind of dismisses as being kind of a waste of time, but he is an ally. So the player heroes are dispatched to deal with some intruders to the Fangorn forest. And it turns out that it's a group of dwarves who were part of the expedition to try to reclaim the mines of Moria, and that there are all of these dwarves who are trapped. So the player heroes actually set off to Moria in order to see if they can help relieve these dwarves and to help them escape, because they're essentially under siege from different orc factions in Moria. Cool stuff right there. I will say that the stakes are high in most of these adventures. We're not talking about the adventures in Hobbit tales here. Now we're talking about some fairly Middle Earth shaking events taking place, and I really, really love it. Then the finale is going to be the player heroes are dispatched to cut off an avenue of attack out of Mordor, where if they're able to block that, then it's going to force the forces of Sauron to have to go through Minas Tirith in order to try to take over the rest of Middle Earth. And something that's very interesting in the finale adventure, which of course is going to take place about the year 3000, is the fact that this is where the player heroes are going to learn of the fate of Saruman. So if Saruman hasn't been corrupted, he's going to be able to assist the player heroes in the big final battle that they face in order to block this avenue of attack. And of course, if Saruman's been corrupted, it's very possible that he may have sent the player heroes intentionally to their doom as a sacrifice to Sauron. Really, really cool stuff here. And then, of course, after that final adventure, now it doesn't, if Saruman has been corrupted and he's offering the player heroes up as sacrifice, doesn't necessarily mean the player heroes are going to meet their doom. They can still survive the encounter, but with a lot of despair, knowing that Saruman had sold them out. But I think it's very cool that once we go through this, we also have some information about what happens if Saruman isn't corrupted. What could future events hold for the War of the Ring that's on the horizon? Really, really interesting stuff here. And I'm also surprised at the fact that this does deviate from the, I guess, established roadmap leading up to the War of the Ring. So that is a peek inside Trials of Saruman for the Lord of the Rings role playing. Let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts as well as my review score. Let's talk a little bit about production quality, because this does contain that nice heavy paperweight that we do see in both the Lord of the Rings role playing and the One Ring. Nice matte finish. Dig that a bunch. I got to say, I prefer the finish on the One Ring books as opposed to the Lord of the Rings, where it's got like all the glare and stuff. I understand why the cover has this finish. It's so that it kind of blends in with the other Dungeons and Dragons books out there. But still, I would prefer more of a matte finish here. This does have a stitched binding, so this is going to hold up very, very nicely. And then, of course, we've got that really cool line art that we are used to from all of the Lord of the Rings role-playing games from Freely Publishing. So very nice there. The adventures themselves, we've got a nice variety as far as those 6 go. They're not just the same old, or kind of doing the same things in each of the missions that the player heroes are set off on. I love the fact that the player heroes become agents of Saruman, that Saruman sends them off to do different things, and that the stakes for each of these missions does get higher as the campaign progresses. I also love the fact that the fall of Saruman isn't necessarily written in stone, depending at the beginning what the lore master decides they want to do as far as the campaign. Got to be honest, I'm kind of surprised that the IP holders who license out the role-playing games for J.R.R. Tolkien's work approved this, because it can really go way off the roadmap to the Lord of the Ring as far as Tolkien's work. Now, of course, I don't think we are going to see supplements in the future that reflect upon, well, what if Saruman isn't corrupted by Sauron? But still, I think it's very cool that we do have this. The adventures themselves are really nicely done, and the campaign overall really does feel epic. One of the issues that some people have with the Lord of the Rings role playing and the One Ring, and really essentially all of the Tolkien role playing games over the years, is that the player characters feel like they're kind of NPCs. They're not the heart of the story, because it's far easier, say, for an IP like Star Wars or Star Trek, for the player characters to be the main focus of adventures, because those universes are so huge, whereas Middle Earth is not. And all of the stories that we have from Middle Earth, especially as far as The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, focus on some very core characters and very little else, that the spotlight is on the Fellowship. That's not the case here. So the players should feel like they are really movers and shakers in the world of Middle Earth. And I love that. I think that is excellent. All right. So I got to say, I am super impressed by the Lord of the Rings Trials of Saruman. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give this a 9 out of 10. All right, that is it for this time out. If you enjoy the Gaming Gang and would like to support the outlet, you can do so in a few ways. First, by utilizing our affiliate links to the One Bookshelf sites, such as DriveThruRPG. To do so, simply visit thegaminggang.com, click on one of our banner ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get 5% of that sale as a commission. And all those commissions really do add up and help keep thegaminggang.com around. You can also make a one-time donation by way of PayPal and become a monthly member of our Patreon. You find links in the show notes. Also in those show notes, you're going to find an invite link to our Discord server. It's absolutely free to sign up, so be sure to hang with the gang over on Discord. Of course, if you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. And if you do ring the bell, be sure to select all notifications, because supposedly YouTube will not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit gaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.